So I will welcome everybody to the Coffee with Cathy, and this is a segment that happens every Friday, and every Friday I've been having a special guest to come on and to talk about different topics, which I really think families have enjoyed, either watching them live with us, or this is recording, and once it's done recording, we will post it on our website. Plus, you can always go back to Facebook and rewatch it. So at this time, I'm going to introduce Nancy Cronin, and she's going to tell you a little bit about herself. So Nancy.
Hello, I'm Nancy Cronin. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Developmental Disabilities Council. And what we do is there's a Developmental Disabilities Council in every state and territory in the nation. We're federally funded, and our job is to do systems advocacy. We try to advocate for people with developmental disabilities of all ages, and see if we can create a world in which everybody's included a little bit more.
Yeah,
so that's about me.
And it is such an essential organization for each state because of the work and what you're providing and doing. So we collaborate an awful lot on a lot of different things, whether it's meetings or whether it's projects. And you know, the council also does some grants, some small grants, and we appreciate that. So we've gone to them, and they've been gracious every year with our fall conference that we put on. So it's been nice, and we've done bigger projects that you've supported too. So
yeah, I mean, we're focusing a lot of things right now. One of the things that COVID has not stopped is we're working with a number of agencies just to test a method to see if we can get restraint and seclusion reduced. Maine has, we have a lot of restraint and seclusion going on for our kids, and it is very distressing. And what we are finding as folks get into adulthood, they're almost expecting to be restrained and secluded. It's traumatizing. You learn that certain things happen. So we are investing quite greatly in seeing whether or not a method will adjust how people treat people with developmental disabilities in such a way in which restraint and seclusion is not as necessary. So we're hoping that will work. We're also doing some things, especially around COVID. So we're supposed to help people with disabilities. I'm sorry, I have a dog, Rico, who wants a ball. We're supposed to, and what our mission is to find ways in which people with developmental disabilities can be involved in their communities. And that's of all ages. That's from birth to the grave. And it can look very different depending on the age. But here's the reality during COVID is, what does it mean to be involved in your community now? I mean, community inclusion is different. This is community inclusion, what we're doing right now. And yet a lot of people don't have access to technology, or they don't know how to use it. So we've just recently bought 148 iPads, and we are have an application, and you'll be able to see in a link below at one point. People can apply if they need
post
iPads.
The links in the,
yeah, it'll be right
in the
underneath
comment
somehow.
box. Yeah, so we should just remind the viewers, Nancy, that in the comment box on Facebook, please post any questions you have there, and we will be posting links for them. And
right.
Tara will go ahead and post the link that you're going to be sharing about your technology.
Great. So we want people to have technology. We just bought 148 iPads for anybody who applies. They have to be owned by a person with a disability or a parent if it's a child of a person with disability, where we are loading things like Zoom and Google Hangouts and all this other stuff for so that you can be a part of this new community, online community. And along with it will come technical support from the University of Maine at Orono to teach you how to use it. How do you get on Zoom? How do you figure out when do you mute? When do you not mute? How do you do a variety of things? And this is especially important for adults with developmental disabilities who wants to be involved, but also children, because there are some children who don't have access to equipment, and they need teletherapy. My son was just in the other room on teletherapy for occupational therapy. I cannot imagine what it would be like if I couldn't get him his therapy. That's part of what's making things normal here. So we want to make sure that children also have the ability to be able to get on to teletherapy, that they have the equipment.
Let's have a little conversation about the teletherapy piece, because I think it's huge within what we're doing. And I totally agree with you, Nancy, about, this is community, even though we're you're where you are, I'm where I am, and our followers who are looking right now are sitting in their living room, sitting in their car, who knows, watching. So how has this teletherapy either been really good, and then on the other hand, I do know that for some of the individuals, it hasn't been good. So maybe we can dive into that a little bit, because I do think that we are struggling still. We're trying to all get on board with the videoing, webinars.
Well, there's a lot of really good and bad things about it. If providers don't necessarily know how to do teletherapy. In Maine, we haven't really done this before. My son happens to get teletherapy through somebody in New York, because we weren't able to get an occupational therapist and a speech therapist in Maine in our remote area. And so the school contracted with an organization who knows how to do it. But then he has another therapist that he works with who has no idea how to do it. The quality isn't as there. So I mean, that's one thing, is many people don't know how to do teletherapy. So we're all having to learn. Then, I mean, I'll tell you, I'm on Zoom all the time.
I know.
I am always here, and it is more exhausting than a regular meeting. It seriously is. I'm having to move myself. I'm sorry. Because I can't move. In a regular meeting, you can move around, you can fidget. It's different. And in a regular meeting, you don't have all this other stuff that's kind of happening. So we're expecting people to engage in teletherapy in their houses with their dogs, asking for a ball or anything else that might be going on. It's not necessarily the most exciting thing to do, and it's hard. So many of our folks can't do this. You're asking people to sit and look and engage in a screen, and you're asking them to do it when they already might have some challenges with communication. So many people are not going to be able to engage this way at all. So for some people, it's a godsend. It's something. At least it's something. For other people, it is, and even them, it's a learning curve. But for others, it's just not practical. So one thing that I'm finding is very frustrating right now is we're expecting everybody to do teletherapy. And if they can't, well, you get nothing. Well, we're offering teletherapy and that's it. That's not enough. We've got to find a way and a method to support people in which teletherapy will not work. And I realize we're in social distancing, but I think we could do a better job finding individual people to go into individual homes, and that's it. I really would like to see Maine Care start looking at hazard pay so that you can afford just to have one client.
And the other thing that I think about, and I know that Maria Smith, she also just typed in a question about teletherapy, speech and OT. It's been a wild experience for a 3-year-old. I can only imagine a 3-year-old trying to interact with whether it's speech or OT via computer. And a lot about autism is based on body language, movements. And if the child moves away from the screen, you have a limited view here of me. So if
Right.
And my son is a rocker, so he's continually doing this or back and forth, so he gets out of vision quickly. I don't know how some parents are doing it, and I wonder if, we have had segments where we've tried to do some OT at home, and what does that look like, and had somebody on that talked about that. Speech and language is another one that I'm hoping to have on, so we can have a nice conversation about what parents can do outside of the realm of the teletherapy that could help out. But it's a struggle. It really is a struggle.
It really is a struggle. And you're also asking people, part of what you're learning, most of the time that I have a conversation with many people, I don't necessarily like looking them straight in the face all the time.
Yeah.
And the rules of Zoom, of this type of conversation is just so incredibly different. And it is functional for now.
Yeah.
Will it be functional forever? It's not what I want to teach. It's not.
Yeah.
But, the other side of this is I also think that people need to, I think it's important to acknowledge that I bet there's a lot of people who are even more lonely than usual.
Yeah, because even the ones that, so, you know, when we talk about like the adult population, some of you know that the Autism Society does have some support groups. So we have one that's running in the Portland region, one in the York County, and one in the Augusta region. So when we're looking at those support groups, they like to meet in person. They like to connect that way. Now that's gone, and we have to offer them the online version, but for some, it's not the same for them. And I just feel like we're letting them down because it's either one way or that's it. And I understand we're in a difficult time. I think everybody knows that, but I'd like people to focus a little bit more on individuals that just can't do telehealth and how can we help and support them. So
I agree. You know, we recently did a survey, Autism Society of Maine, Maine Developmental Disabilities Council, Maine Parent Federation, to 148 families, basically to see how are you. And about 17% clearly were struggling with kids with challenging behaviors, in which teletherapy was not working, in which distance learning wasn't working. More than that percentage had difficulty figuring out, how am I supposed to even do this education? It's so hard. And are we setting people up to be in crisis? Without a crisis, without really a response to help them. I actually very recently talked to a policymaker today, because that's primarily my job. My job is to advocate in policy. So I talk to different policymakers, whether it's in Maine Care or Child and Family Services, and try to represent what's going on and provide solutions. And what I said was, this is really demonstrating a lack of communication to actual customers, families, people. We're communicating to providers, but not to people. And what happens is we're not actually hearing what's on the ground. And you cannot be part of government without understanding what human beings need. And many human beings need, many folks with autism need a way somehow to socialize, to have face-to-face contact, because online doesn't work. And not giving them that may set people up to fail. Now, on the flip side, there's a lot of people who don't want anybody around, and that's okay too. And some people, it's all working. So this is, you know, we're humans, we're all different.
I think it's that balancing act. And I think one of the things that, you know, we look at is, like, I mean, I know I had a conversation this week with one of the developmental pediatricians. There's very few of them around in the state, but I had one of them reach out to me and said, what are we doing about the most challenging children? Exactly. She was seeing a great number in her practice already regressing, and was really asking questions about, are we reaching out to the Department of Education? Are we reaching out to the Department of Health and Human Services to let them know? And the answer is yes, we're trying. We're trying to let them know that our population, and I don't want it to be like we're the only ones, but this is a unique population that requires more than one person making a decision, because everybody is so individualized that we need to look at what can we do to help the most challenging, that nothing is fitting into their realm. They're not doing telehealth. They don't have anybody coming into their home. And that's, you know, and yes, we are reaching out. So we're looking for people who want to belong to, whether it's going to be a call with the Department of Education, and trying to get I know that there's already calls with the Department of Health and Human Services through Office of Children and Family Services, and Office of Adults and Office of Aging and Disability Services. That's OADS and OCFS. One's for children, one's for adults. They have weekly call-ins, but we find that those are all provider-based. We're asking for family-based call-ins. So we're really hoping that we can get that established. We want the same thing with the Department of Education. We want them to hear directly from the family. So I'm hoping this can get put together. We're still trying. We have not had anything set up yet, but I know Nancy, you're helping to advocate around that, and Maine Parent Federation is also. So yeah,
it's really, really important. And unfortunately, in some ways the families that call in, what they're going to be finding is that they're probably not going to be finding their solutions for their family yet, but they're going to be opening the door to direct the government to do it, to do what their families need. Again, what is the job of government? It's to protect people. It's to help. And if we're putting all kinds of money towards providers and providers are not actually giving services, boy, what's the point? We need to find some answers in this.
And I think we need to, pull our minds together. I know, Kendra's on the call, and, Kendra has 2 kids that have significant, I want to say issues, but they're going into crisis and going to the ER for hours, and that's not even helpful. I didn't even know if they could accept them at the ER. I mean, that would be the last place I'd want to bring my child anyway. And
Right.
It's just, we can't have that. We need to try to help prevent this before families are facing these crises. No parent wants to go to an emergency room during an epidemic because they weren't getting support at home. So we need to keep fighting.
Seriously, where does the buck stop? The buck has to stop somewhere.
Yeah.
And actually, that was the call I had this morning, saying there needs to be some Section 28 providers, for instance, are providing services. But who?
Yes. Yeah.
We need a list of who's providing services, so that, and there needs to be an easy way for families to be able to go from one place that they're not providing services to another. I'm hoping that you can hear me. I've got all this background noise with the dog and the child, and that's what happens. So, but there needs to be something. I was shocked on our survey that we did. We had, what was it, 26% of families hadn't been contacted by their case manager or in-home support worker.
Yeah, that's a high number.
That's like 1 in 4. I mean, the schools were doing better. Only 17% had not been contacted. That's a fifth.
Yeah.
But a fourth of case managers. I also heard about case managers being laid off. Talk about something that can be done online. But anyway, I digress.
And then, so, we talk about the families and the young children, and we know these families are struggling. Now I want to shift our focus over to, you're an adult living on your own. And we know that there's a lot of isolation that happens with adults, because we hear about it all the time. That's why we have some support groups. But imagine now you're an adult that lives by yourself, and now you're not able to even go to your support group or anything. And I'm wondering what's happening for these adults around. Is anybody else working with them? Is anybody else even thinking about them? Are the case managers not contacting them neither?
Well, we're doing a checkup. So one of the people that we work really, really closely with is speaking up for us. And that is the state self-advocacy organization. And a lot of people with intellectual disability and autism belong to it. And I am hearing from them that people are lonely, but I am hearing a lot more positive things about the adult population than the children's population. I'm hearing about some pretty amazing systems in which the adult system has set up that one provider will work with one person. And that is so to make sure that they're safe. I'm hearing some other pockets of information in which people are sitting alone. I've actually heard of some group homes closing and the individual going back home and is alone now while their parents are at work. So I've heard pockets of great stories, and I've heard pockets of awful stories. Yeah. So I think that is the true message of this, is it's all up to the providers to choose what they feel safe doing. It's a patchwork quilt of services. And the problem with the patchwork quilt of services is some people get it and some people don't. And that's distressing. I'm excited that the Waiver K has been at least submitted. And so let's talk about that.
Can you explain what the Waiver K is for those who are following us, that, you know, where we forget, people don't understand in our world, we run with these. So explain what that is.
I barely understand what the Waiver K is. I call it Special K every now and then people laugh at me.
That's a good acronym, Special K, because it really is a special package.
It is. It's a special package specifically for emergency times. So after Hurricane Katrina came and a lot of people were left, a lot of people with disabilities were left without any support. They said we really need a way of being able to give some additional funding that's short term. So for example, for adults who have parents and they're living with their parents, parents can get paid now for this period of time, so they can get reimbursed for as soon as they're.
I think so, Nancy, we need to clarify that they have to be in a waiver for that to happen.
You're absolutely right. This is not for children at all, and you have to be on Section 21 or 29. That's right.
Yes.
This is only waiver services. You're absolutely right. Thank you. That's critical. But that never happened before, in which parents would be able to be reimbursed, and I'm hoping that will help a little bit. They've made pretty clear that providers can do some unique things. For instance, shared living providers, you still only be able to have one person, and now you can have two.
Yeah.
For a short amount of time. Yeah. There's additional monies that can become available to support people. And there's no kind of hazard pay for children. There is now for adults to be able to ensure that those supports get in there. I'm encouraged. This is not a surprise. This is necessary. So hopefully we'll provide some money out there for the adult service system to ensure that people get supports. Flood some more money into it.
So is Section 21 SLO? So is that SLO meaning supported living? Yeah.
That's your shared living.
Is 21, that's included, isn't that included in 29 too though?
It is.
Or no?
Either one, it is. So it's increasing the cap.
Another good thing that families need to understand is, if you are in, say your child is in section, I'm going to use mine. So my child is in Section 29. He has a day hab setting. He goes to work. And we decided to take him home for 2 weeks and not let him go to day hab. So I could then, as a parent, under this Appendix K, go to the agency providing that and say, look, I had him home for 2 weeks. This is what we did with him. They would have to hire me, and then I would get paid from that agency.
That's right.
You got to be hired to get paid. They're not just going to send you a check in the mail. So you just need to know that too. But it's the same thing with Section 21. So if it's 21, the parent chooses to bring their child home from a house, or you know, whether or not they're not comfortable, or maybe the COVID-19 hit that agency and they wanted to bring the child home, then they'll do the same thing. They will be able to get paid. They're going to get hired by the agency, but they will then be getting the money that their child was getting underneath that waiver. It'll go to the parent and not the provider.
And that's true for day programming, correct? Because a lot of our day programs are not happening.
Right. Some day programs are completely closed, and our day program is still open, but we chose to pull him out for 2 weeks just to lessen the opportunity for him to interact with anybody and come down with anything. He is now back into program, and transportation will actually start with him, which brings me to another topic.
Yeah.
With the new guidelines with the governor, everybody in public needs to wear a mask. Yes. And a mask with individuals with autism is a sensory issue. And I'm going to try it. I reached out to my niece today. Thank you, Danielle, for helping me out. She's gone to look for material to cover his face with a mask, with something that would relate that he would like. So we looked up John Deere stuff for snowmobile things, and she's going to make a special mask for him. So maybe he'll put it on because it's one of his specialty things that he likes, but I can't be guaranteed that. And that's hard. So let's talk about that piece. How are we going to get individuals wearing masks?
Yeah, that's for sure. And of course, the answer is going to be individualized, isn't it?
It is.
How you're going to figure out how to even begin that, you know, whether or not they'll tolerate it, for how long, for what, and why, and also, how do you explain it?
Yes.
You know, this is a very scary time, but how do you explain that you need to wear this mask? And when you're going out and looking at people, for some children and some adults, I suspect this is going to look, I think a social story is even necessary, potentially, for explaining, even if they don't wear it, although I know they have to. There's got to be an exception to that somewhat.
And I think
got to look at that.
That's another area where, Nancy, I would look towards you and towards some of our other colleagues to say, look, this is what we are seeing and what we're hearing. Now, some individuals are going to probably like that. You know, you have a lot of individuals that are very germ and, oh, I get to wear gloves and a mask. Oh, I'm happy. And everybody else will look the same. But individuals that, like my son, who, you know, really don't tolerate things on his hands and don't like to have anything across his face, even when he goes snowmobiling, you know, we have the shield that comes down. He's constantly lifting that up. He does not want something over his face. And we work and work and work on this. Like many families, we don't just, you know, let it go. That's a safety thing, and we're constantly working on it. So now we're in the realm of, if he wants to go to a store, he hasn't stepped foot in a store in 6 weeks. He's going to have to wear a mask, because I don't know who in the store is going to say, oh, look, individual, not a mask, kick him out. And that would be meltdown right there. So it's an issue. And I think we need to try to work with some officials around, you know, I mean, if others are wearing their mask, I don't know. I just feel like we need to do something, because we're going to force people, and it's going to force probably some safety issues with the individuals if they're trying to make them wear these masks. And
I think you're right. I mean, the truth is I hate the mask. I'm going to wear the mask. I will comply. However, it is a real sensory issue.
Yeah.
Face gets very hot. Sometimes you can't see out of your glasses. It's hard. But how are you going to do that with a 3-year-old? You know, you mentioned that we had a 3-year-old on the call. I think that there's going to be a variety, and I haven't seen yet, but I haven't looked very hard. Is there any exceptions to this? So I do know that, you know, we've been advocating pretty hard that hospitals allow a trusted person be able to come with you. And I'm hoping that is changing, that every hospital is going to be able to do that. But it's the same kind of accommodation. If you cannot do that for some reason, you should be able to have an exception. But you're right. What will the public think?
Yeah. You know, I follow the Bangor Police Department on Facebook, because they just have these wonderful things with their duck, you know, that they have there. What's the name of their duck? Duck of Justice. Yes, I love him. So they posted something this morning, which I thought was pretty interesting. And it was somebody, you know, the police officer was making a nice post about, basically, as a police officer, I am not going to arrest somebody because they're not wearing a mask. But he says, what we do have to abide by is, if there's a business and the business is wearing masks and they don't allow customers in without a mask, and somebody walks in without a mask, they have the right to say, under the governor's orders, I can't have you come in here. I'd like you to leave. And if they don't want to leave, and saying that that's their amendment right or whatever, the police will get called. But you can't call the police if somebody's walking up the street without a mask. It has to be something where the establishment is forcing that rule, and then the police will call if they're not putting their mask on. It was interesting. And you know, I think people are very sensitive to being told they got to do something. And again, in my reasoning is, I understand it, and I'm going to try my hardest, but it's going to be a tough thing with my son, and I'm going to keep working at it. So sensitive.
I think it's ironic because the mass together will prevent slow this spread. I mean, I think her theory might be that if everybody wears a mask, it's seriously limiting the potential spread of this virus, but it makes it feel scarier.
Yeah.
Everybody wearing a mask is so foreign to our nation that it feels more frightening. And I think we have to be sensitive for our loved ones, that this is going to be very odd to some of them.
It's difficult. I agree. I think that, when every Friday we've been doing these segments, and like I said, I've had past guests on that talk about different topics, from school issues to OT to behaviors, which I will have another behavioral one coming up, because I think that's one where families are just struggling so bad around that. They want more guidance. So I think I guess when I step back and I look at everything, and the one thing that I think is, although this is difficult right now, we are getting through it.
We are.
And every challenge we take a small bite and we try to do our best. And that's what I want to tell parents is, do it in these small increments. And, the guidelines that just came out, I don't know if you read them, they were 6 pages. I was like, yeah, and I'm like, I'm going to take this small little bite, see if I can accomplish that. Because as a parent, if we want to move forward, we could never move forward with all those steps. We have to do it in such a slow mannerism. And the only thing we can look at is when we're through it, when the rainbow is coming with the end of this rainbow, we can look back and say, you know what, we got through that. And now I have a couple of skills underneath, my child's belt and my belt, how to handle things for the future. And we know where we need to practice things for if this happens again. And I even hate to say that, but in my realm, I'm like going, it's not one and done. It's okay, one and what's the next hurdle, and just being prepared as families.
Right. So. This is unprecedented. We have not had a virus like this ever. Our bodies are not used to this virus. We have no immunity except for the few that have had it already. I hope that they now have the immunity. I haven't even seen studies of that. We are going to this is all a waiting game, but it's going to take time. So it's not one and done. 2020 is the year of the coronavirus. And I guess what I would like to see, because I'm seeing all these, Facebook is a really interesting place. And I'm seeing all this. I'm seeing all this. Some people are just angry at things not being opened up. And other people are desperate about wanting to make sure that things not open up. And things are getting heated now. And I think we have to have compassion for ourselves as well as everybody else, that we're all kind of scared right now. We're all a little scared. And, it's hard for me as a mom sometimes to remember that if I'm frustrated and tired, my kid is probably as well. I try to remember that. I'm not successful half the time. I'm human. This isn't easy. But we have to have compassion for everybody. So, and when it comes to these masks and these changes, this is going to be tough, but we're going to get through it. I'm worried. Go ahead.
I was going to switch subjects, but if you still have something to say on this one, go ahead.
No, I was actually going to ask you about group homes.
Oh, that's where I was heading. Look at that. We're on the same page.
We are. Go for it then.
I do think that for me, it's like, I've had parents who have a child that's in a group home setting, and because of what's happening, they're not able to see their child and the difficulties that causes. So I know as parents, my son's home with me. I see him every day. I get to touch him every day. But as parents who have to make that difficult decision, whether it's a child that needs to be, placed temporarily just to get some things under control, or whether it's an adult that's been their path and that's where they are right now. To me, those are the difficult scenarios, because the first thing
Yeah.
we do as mothers is we want to mother our child, and in a difficult time when we see what's happening around us, that instinct kicks in even more and you're not able to do anything. So I know there's some families we've been working with who are in that category, and they are trying their hardest to use Zoom with their child, but you know, again, the understanding
That's
of,
not always working.
you know, no, I want my mom, you know, why isn't my mom here? You know, that's just a picture of her on a screen. And then you have some staff that don't understand the importance of that child at least seeing their parent. It all around for everybody in these group settings. And then what happens when they get the virus in that group setting? So
I know it's almost like there's two sides to this. One is people are experiencing loss, you know,
yeah,
being separated by their loved ones. You know, I know people who go and visit their son or daughter every day,
yeah,
or a number of times a week, or there's a routine. I mean, routine is so important in many folks' lives, and that lack of routine is happening. So a lot of people are going through essentially a loss, a grief of not being able to see them. And then you're combined with this fear of how do I, you know, a mom recently said to me, she goes and she sees her son every day and it makes her feel like her son is safe because there's separate eyes. You know, she's seeing him with his own eyes. How do you do that now that you can't, and how hard that is? So there's this kind of fear of how do I keep my kids safe when I can't get to them?
right.
And then there's the other side, which is, you know, you're seeing all these scary news reports from other states in which these group homes are, I mean, congregate settings are tinder for this virus. That you look at the nursing homes, and our state in some ways is lucky in the fact that most of our group homes are not very big,
Yeah,
which make it less dangerous. You know, most of the group homes are 2-3 people,
yeah,
and that is really lucky, you know. So I mean, that's the other side of this is when you're looking at other states and you're seeing the enormous reports of all these outbreaks in New York, and the reports of group homes with folks with autism and other developmental disabilities is appallingly scary. In our state, that's not how our system was set up.
yeah.
So that's one comfort in some ways.
You know, do you think that would drive some future, if we're looking at the future and what we want to see set up, do you think that might drive some now that we're looking back on like, wow, you know, that was so helpful. We can't go to these big settings. We have to stay that small, intimate house here and a house there and stuff like that.
Yes. Yes. I hope so. I hope that this pushes to keep the very small settings or more at home or more community house based. It is really a blessing that we're in this situation. And I see people looking at, you know, the reason the Appendix K waiver came up is because during Katrina, they had staff who were buddy systems. Staff was supposed to stay with their buddy with a person with developmental disability. And what ended up happening is these staff went to their families during the flood. And what we're seeing in our state is direct care workers who are essentially heroes, but they're saying, I'm going to stay with you and I'm not going to be with my family. You know, they're having to pick where they are during this pandemic. And a shout out for some of those direct care workers who are doing that and caring so much about the people that they work for. You know, there's really some lovely stories and awful stories. It's this mixed bag that we've got. But people, I wonder if one reason why we have more direct care workers staying with our small group homes is because they know the people, that it's a more personal environment, and they care about them more. You know, yes, without a doubt. This is the best example of why we should never build another giant institution.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things I'll mention, which, you know, I think I mentioned it once before, but let's say we have a family who was receiving Section 28 and that provider no longer felt it safe for them to be going into the homes, but yet the workers really were like, no, that's my kiddo. I'm always with them. They should at least try to reach out to NAMI and see if they can get some of that respite piece, because all they'd have to do is show them a paycheck stub that they were providing this service and have already been screened, and they could still get paid to go into that home. It might not be many hours. So I think they're only allowing 26 hours a month, but still, to a parent who's been home with that child all day, having somebody come into the home, even if it's for an hour, so they can do some aggressive exercise or some aggressive, outside running around, would make a world of difference. So I just reach out to the families and let them know, yes, it's a small pot of money. You don't already have to have respite through NAMI. You can sign up with their application. It's a smaller version application. So if you've done it before and you're going like, I filled that out before, it's like 18 pages. It's a lot smaller, and they just need somebody that, maybe it's an ed tech. So maybe the ed tech was working with that student, and now that ed tech doesn't have that physical contact, but that person wouldn't mind doing that, but they're not doing it through the school system. They can do it through respite. I'm just throwing that out there because I know a lot of people have been so just looking for anything. And even though it's a small piece, it's a small piece. So
I think it's huge, and it's also for the individuals. I mean, yes. These children, my kiddo is 10 years old and is around a 49-year-old and a 52-year-old all the time. He is an only child. He wants to see other people much more than he wants to see his parents right now.
Yeah.
This is a really big thing. And I also think it goes full circle when we have our town hall meeting and we talk to Office of Child and Family Services. We need to say, there needs to be a way in which people can connect with these families. This is part of community. For some reason, other people have been able to adapt to COVID in ways that kids with disabilities have not been, and adults with disabilities have not been able to adapt. It's because they cannot access the technology in the same way, or it doesn't have the meaning that it is. And I think that there is a responsibility to ensure that these folks are not completely socially disconnected. People are not safe when they're disconnected.
Yeah.
If you want safety, you have community.
Yeah, and how do you do individuals that are completely nonverbal? The online piece, my son's nonverbal. He wouldn't do that well. Besides, he might be interested in looking at a food being made or somebody cooking. He probably would like that. But yeah, he's really not able to communicate, like me and you are doing right now. That wouldn't be an option for him. And 30% of individuals that have autism are nonverbal. So we have to think about, there's a big percentage out there that need a little bit more than what we're providing. And here's another fact that I didn't realize, and I guess it made me stop and go, what? But families can opt out of the school choice. So if they don't want to do the virtual online, then they can just stop school altogether. Did you hear that, Cathy?
I guess it doesn't surprise me. I think you're right, they can.
Yeah, they're choosing to be done. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I didn't realize that. So what are they doing? And it's such a variety though. Some schools are doing distance learning. I feel like I'm lucky. My son's special education teacher was able to get his therapies online and works with him. But as far as his regular classroom, it's distance learning. That means we get a packet every 2 months and we're supposed to kind of make it through on our own. That's impossible. That's hard. Yeah. So I'm not surprised that some people are not, and then there's other schools that are doing remote learning, which seems hard, and other schools are doing nothing at all, but no schools are grading. So grading is done. For the distance learning, they're not collecting any of the information. Nobody is seeing the work. So where's the incentive? Yeah. I'm just going to mention, Haley just posted a really neat link for us, Autism Little Learners, wearing a mask story for children. So I think that's awesome. So it's posted in the comments for all of you. Thank you, Haley, for finding that for us. It is difficult, and anytime we can come up with sharing what's working, and with families, that's what we need. We need to share it with each other, because not one person has all those answers, especially
No.
when it's about autism. We
No.
know that they're so individualized. What works for one doesn't work for another. And it's the same thing in the adult population. We have so many adults that have such great capabilities, but yet
Yes.
workplaces aren't looking at what their abilities are. They're looking at, well, this is what I need, you know, and we need to change the way and the value that adults that we have. And I think hopefully that's going to start when people start realizing that. And Temple Grandin does a wonderful job with honoring individuals and giving you such great ideas about how to look at their values and what they're really good at, and how you can incorporate that into a work environment. So yeah,
And that's not just, that's also now during COVID. I know we're at a 19% unemployment rate, but some of the things that people can do now from home, some folks with autism would be great at.
Yeah.
Some folks, you know, it's all different. You can't say this, everybody would be great at everything. Everybody is unique, but there should also be opportunities now I mean, I know some individuals who have autism who would be fantastic at kind of doing technical assistance, especially with some elderly folks who don't know what to do. You know, they have much more, the person that I'm thinking of has a lot more skill than I have. You know, so I think we need to think creative now too. My fear is that folks with autism and other developmental disabilities are being forgotten in all of this, because we're all in kind of an ocean of uncertainty. And I think that it's folks with autism and other developmental disabilities who need to be kind of thought of first, because when we figure out a system that will work when you figure out a system that will work with folks with autism, it'll work for everybody. Yeah. Because everybody with autism is different. So if you can cover autism, you can cover anything.
Yeah. Everybody will fit somewhere in the realm underneath that, because there's so many that have, you know, I got sensory, plus I have, you know, learning disability. I've got, you know,
exactly.
It is a little bit all over the place, but you're right. We need to look down the paths of what's working for a lot of adults. And here's a big thought that people don't think of often. And actually, Nancy, were you at the LEND thing this morning, the presentation of the posters? I could do the first hour. I couldn't do the whole thing. But one of the presenters who they were a LEND student, they put their poster together and everything. They had multiple conversations with adults on the spectrum. Who would have thought having a conversation with an adult would give you some vital information? We're too afraid to ask them questions in this world. We need to step up to that plate and say, how does that make you feel? How do you feel about this? And what does that do? And because it's going to make you learn. And I was like, you know, when she said it, I'm like, going, really? Having a conversation helps. Yeah. Because, you know,
I had a conversation before I was on the we have some podcasts, and I should have brought you a link to our podcast of people with
post it later. Yeah.
Good. All right. Perfect. People who were in Pineland, who are not in Pineland, who left Pineland and are doing well now, what their stories are. So a reporter called me and she said, can you tell me the history of Pineland and kind of the history of where we are? And I was talking, and she said, well, what do you mean about what is a large congregate setting and quality of life? And I said, well, let me ask you, where do you want to live? Do you want to live with 30 other people that you don't know, or do you want to live with one person that you might not know? Well, let's just be really honest here. We want we want what we would all want, and that is to live in the community where people care about us and we are valued.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just it. It's just the same song, and we're probably boring the people who are watching us. But I guess the reason I have to say this so many times is because we are not valued. People with disabilities are not valued. They are taken care of, and we need both.
Right.
We need both.
What they offer sometimes is more than what you can imagine, but it's to get that information out, I guess. That's where we struggle. if we don't ask, we won't know. And we somehow in this environment, we feel like, oh, I really don't want to ask that question. But my first question when I meet somebody, like I have a new board member that's starting on the spectrum, and my first question is, do you need any type of an accommodation? I need to know that. So I want to make sure that you're, you know, going to be on the board and participate the way you want to participate. And we want to make sure that we accommodate that. Not that, well, this is how we do it. You know what I mean?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. We also have to avoid our biases. I remember, I'm thinking about this one, I teach at a community college, and a lot of individuals with autism actually take my classes. I teach psychology, I teach sociology, and I've had a number of folks take the class. And one of my classes is the history of disabilities. And I talk about the history of disability. And I remember looking at this young woman, thinking to myself, oh my gosh, there are so many dark things about this. I don't want to offend her. I don't want to trigger her. And I did the presentation, and then after I took her, she and I went for a walk. And so we were walking, and I'm like, how you doing? And she looked at me in her way, and she said, I'm not allowed to have a history. I'm not allowed to have, people with autism aren't allowed to have a history that is sometimes yucky. And I'm like, whoa. And she said, we're not allowed to be able to celebrate the heroes who got us out and rose us up so that I can go to this school. And, you know, it was like, it slapped me right in the face. And I'm like, hell yes, you are allowed. And why? Excuse me. I'm like, what was up with my bias there? What was my thing there? About, you know, everybody is different, but there's a rich history, there's rich things. And there was another person who was on my board who I was concerned. There was a major conversation. It wasn't a traumatic situation, but it was a rough situation our organization was having. And I had to really check myself and say, hey, Nance, you need to just ask things. You just need to talk to everybody. And as you talk to people, they respond, and you figure out where the conversation needs to go. There's really no difference, whether it's somebody who uses augmentative communication or else. You say something, you get a response, you build on it, you get your message through. But this kind of fear about not talking to people, that's so, well, if I did that, I'd miss out with a lot of cool people, because there's a lot of cool people in this world, and some of them have disabilities.
Yeah, and we got to give them those chances, those opportunities, and we don't do that enough, I think, because we're either not sure if they can handle it or do it without even asking them. And that's the whole point. You got to go and say, this is what we're looking for. What do you think? You know, and give them that opportunity. And that's part of what the society does is, you know, when we do some of our events that we do, whether it's the family retreat weekend or the summer camps that we do, which unfortunately our summer camps have been canceled. And the family retreat, well, it's up in the air right now. We're hoping. But at those events, children that would come to those events and participate as an individual on the spectrum, then as they grow and they get older, they become our respite providers, our junior counselors at the summer camps. We give them the opportunities because they've been through it, and they really add a lot. So that's one of the things that, you know, we like to see. We like to see individuals who have grown and now want to give back. And then there's those that say, no, I just want to come for the weekend. And like, that's good. That's what you can do too. So, yeah.
I love that. I love the society. The Autism Society of Maine is amazing. You bring people together. It's a wonderful thing.
So right now, I think we've got what? Maybe 6 minutes left. Was there another topic that we wanted to cover that we didn't cover? Did we post all of our links that we wanted to post? We did post those, and we have a couple others there. Is there something else we should share, Nancy, for closing statements or?
Well, I think
talk about this all day because that's what we do,
I think
right?
the most important thing that needs to be said is I know that things may be very busy and very hard, but I want to thank everybody who's shared in the survey and contacts you folks or me and tells us what's going on, because the fact is without knowing that, we can't do our job and advocate. And so And also it makes you know, I'm sitting here in my little one corner of my house that I claim as my office space, as my husband and family gets all other things. It makes things more meaningful knowing that what people's experiences are out there so that we can change it.
Sharing
So
the stories. Families need to continue to share their stories, and it could be
please,
with you, with us, with Maine Parent Federation, whoever they're in contact with. We got to share those stories, and we got to make sure that the department understands,
and that's it.
you know, what families are going through, because there's a lot of times that things, they really do their best, and I think sometimes they have great intentions. And I don't want to say
Yes.
anything ill, because I do think that they try their very best. But without being a family member in that realm, living that experience, sometimes we miss the mark a little bit. And we need to make sure that those family stories are there. The adults are sitting at the tables when they can.
Yes. Have you ever heard of ivory tower syndrome? Ivory tower syndrome. Have you? Ivory tower syndrome,
No.
I always think of like a fairy tale. But an ivory tower is you're up in the ivory tower and you're making rules and policy, and you think, really, and I am serious here, you think that what the rule says is actually what happens. You think that you wrote down in a rule that case managers are going to do a certain thing, and you assume like magic that that's what happens. It is extremely easy for policymakers to get ivory tower syndrome. And the only way to break that is by hearing stories in which are, this is what my life is like. This is what it is. And that allows people like you and I and Maine Parent Federation to be able to go and say, yeah, no, it's not like that. No, I know that you think that everybody, all the case managers have contacted people, but no, 26, 1 in 4 has not. Or you think that everybody can do teletherapy and it's best just do this, but you're missing this population. And this population can't scream and be vocal and verbal right now or visible.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you the first thing I'm going to be doing today when I get off the phone is contacting the governor's office about, or contacting OADS and OCFS about some guidance around the masks for people who have sensory issues. We need an accommodation, potentially. Not for everybody. I don't want it misused.
Right.
But I know some people who would feel, especially adults with autism, who would say, oh my gosh, if I don't do this, I could go to jail and be fined. I think that would be very scary for some people who take it very literally.
And they're very rule orientated. So can you imagine them out in the public wearing a mask and others not? So that would also cause conflict for them. So yeah.
That might happen. Unfortunately, that might happen. I mean, today is the day, and I didn't know this was going to happen. Neither did you. No. So we're kind of now responding to this new change as opposed to being able to say, hey, what about?
Yeah. Well, Nancy, I want to thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a great session. Like always, this is recorded, so this will be on our Facebook page that you can go and look at, or you can look at it from our website. It takes us a day, I think, to get that up on the website. Be up by Monday. So thank you, Nancy, for taking an hour and talking with me.
Thank you. I enjoyed coffee with Cathy.
And remember, you know, I had coffee in my cup, but whatever you have to get you through the day, that's up to you.
It was water, but there you go.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We're looking forward to next Friday's event, okay?
Bye. Thank you.
Okay, you're off live.
This is recording, so.
Oh, did she leave?
Nancy did, yeah. She left right away.